Imagine this. It's a cold November morning in the early 1860s. You're wearing your best wool clothes. Not because you're headed to a fancy dinner, but because you're going to church. Yep, that's right. Before Thanksgiving meant turkey and football, it meant a long sermon in a packed wooden pew. There's no national holiday yet. Your state just maybe decided to have one this year. Some Americans down south don't celebrate at all. But in New England, it's the biggest day of the year to go home, see family, and believe it or not, meet your future crush at a community dance. After church, your family digs into a giant feast. Smoky pumpkin pie, baked in old brick ovens, roasted goose or turkey, jugs of cider, and something called Indian pudding, a sweet, gooey cornmeal dessert people loved back then. There was no parade, no football, no shopping, just food, visiting neighbors, and giving thanks. That was Thanksgiving before 1863, when it was just a local holiday, celebrated sometimes in some places. Believe it or not. Welcome to Believe It or Not, the show where weird is real and the truth is stranger than fiction. I'm your host, Bryan, and today we're traveling back to the year 1863, when one U.S. president made a decision that would change American tradition forever. Yep, Thanksgiving didn't just become a holiday. It took a war, a persistent woman, and a president desperate for hope to make it happen. Let's dig in. Let's rewind the clock to 160 years ago. America was in chaos. The Civil War was ripping the country apart. Cities were burning. Families were divided. More than 3 million soldiers marched across the land, and every newspaper brought heartbreaking news. Even victory meant heartache and despair for your fellow countrymen. Now imagine being President Abraham Lincoln during all this. Every day felt like bad news, tougher decisions, and more sleepless nights. But somewhere far from the battlefield lived a woman named Sarah Josepha Hale. At the time, she was a well-known author, poet, and a powerful magazine editor. And she had a dream. America should have one special day every year, a day where families gather, eat a big meal, and give thanks. A holiday of peace, a holiday of unity. And she didn't just think it. She campaigned for it for 17 years. Letters, articles, more letters, governors, senators, presidents. But nobody ever said yes. That is until 1863. Sarah Hale wrote to Lincoln during the darkest part of the Civil War. Her letter basically said, "Mr. President, the country needs hope. Let's give people one day they can all celebrate. Together." Lincoln read her words, and for the first time in months, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long while. Possibility. He thought, maybe a day of Thanksgiving could help heal a broken nation. So, on October 3rd, 1863, Lincoln made an official announcement. The last Thursday of November would be a national day of Thanksgiving, a day of gratitude, a day of family, a day of peace, even during war. And believe it or not, people listened. In small towns, huge cities, farmhouses, and military camps, families gathered around tables and cooked the biggest feast they could manage. In the middle of a terrible war, Americans sat together, bowed their heads, and gave thanks. It didn't fix everything, but it reminded people that they were still a country, still connected, still hoping for better days. And that single day of unity became a tradition that has lasted over 160 years. All because one writer didn't give up and one president said yes. Now, here are a few interesting facts about Thanksgiving I learned while researching this podcast. Abraham Lincoln's Thanksgiving Proclamation was written by his secretary, who finished it in just one day. Now, you may be thinking, we have Thanksgiving on the last Thursday of November because it makes for a great 4-day weekend. But that wasn't the case when the last Thursday in November was chosen. It was chosen because it fit the harvest calendar perfectly. Thanksgiving, it grew out of post-harvest celebrations. And by late November, the harvest was finished. The weather wasn't too harsh yet, and farmers weren't in their busiest season. So late November was the sweet spot. Not too early, not too late. Also, New England governors had already been using that date for a long time. Thanksgiving started as a New England tradition, and many governors there preferred the last Thursday because it avoided early November elections, it avoided December's religious holidays, and it created a reliable yearly rhythm families could count on. New England culture and customs spread westward as people migrated, and so did the preferred date. And finally, why Thursday? Well, back then, Thursday was considered the lecture day. Going back to colonial Puritan times, Thursday was the traditional day for things like public sermons, community gatherings, and other religious events that didn't take place on Sunday. You see, Thanksgiving originally centered on sermons and community worship. So Thursday just made sense. And believe it or not, before it became a national holiday, different states celebrated Thanksgiving on totally different days, and some didn't celebrate at all. In fact, it wasn't until 1941 that Congress passed a law making Thanksgiving the fourth Thursday in November, which is the date Lincoln intended, and the date we celebrate today. Before then, Thanksgiving was a lot like Easter, when nobody really knew when it was happening, until it was happening. Now remember Sarah Hale, the woman who wrote hundreds of letters to famous leaders to push for Thanksgiving? All written by hand and from the heart? Well, she didn't just help create Thanksgiving. She also created a little nursery rhyme that you might know. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb. That's right, she's the same woman. Also, she came up with the idea for the White House Christmas tree. Now that's what I call a trifecta of good ideas. Before Lincoln's 1863 proclamation, Thanksgiving wasn't a shared national experience. It was a religious, sometimes sporadic holiday chosen by governors or religious leaders based on harvests, prayers, or local events. It's pretty amazing that one person, Sarah Hale, kept pushing for nearly 2 decades to make Thanksgiving a reality. And it's equally amazing that in that time of fear, sadness, and conflict, people chose to come together for a moment of peace. So, here's a question for you to ponder. If your country were going through a really difficult time, what kind of tradition would you create to bring people together? Also, if you could make a holiday, what foods would you choose to help you celebrate it? I know for me, personally, we'd have a National Bacon Day, with the BLT as the featured menu item. Today, we learned how a writer with a dream and a president searching for hope created one of America's most beloved holidays, Thanksgiving. Thanks to people like Sarah Hale and Abraham Lincoln, we can celebrate Thanksgiving together on the same day every year. But just imagine how different it would feel if it changed every year. And now, here's a little Thanksgiving joke for you. Why did the turkey join a band? Because it already had drumsticks. Ba-dum-bumps. Next time on Believe It or Not, we're looking at the sticky, spiky, unbelievable story of the invention of Velcro and how a dog covered in burrs changed the world. Now, before we go, if you enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to follow and leave a review, because that really helps me figure out what unbelievable true stories to cover next. Until then, keep wondering, keep learning, and remember, sometimes the truth is weirder than fiction.